Ozan is going to be leading a panel discussion called Great Opportunities for Startups. So do you want to take charge here and introduce your panelists? Please.
Pleasure. One of the things I'm super happy that I've done, like getting you involved with Startup Istanbul and always makes me happy. And the other organization I'm really happy that I'm going to be hosting is Kaust. Hattan should be around. Where are my panelists? They know themselves. And I'm going to actually ask the startups, who are the panelists? What? You haven't Googled them? All right. That's not going to go well with you. All right. So I need, it's going to hurt so much. So, founders who are volunteers to talk to me for 3 to 5 minutes. Are there any? Whoever wants to catch me. Okay. Do you know who the panelists are? Okay, tell me.
After dinner.
I know them, but tell me. Come on, guys. This is not something you should have done. Anyways, yes, you know one of them.
Yes, one of them are in the Zain Telecom.
Yes, was, not in, still. Was. 3 or 4 years ago. Okay, yes. And? Okay, good. I mean, this is the basics. And if you're coming to a panel, please Google people. Everything's on the website. Because if you know what they're up to, you can actually have a really intense personal conversation with them. That is a really interesting way to get engaged. Do we have 40 minutes? Yeah, it's like, yeah, okay. Like, you do not want to give me 40 minutes. All right, perfect. Nice. So again, very happy to be joined by you guys. Google them. I don't want to do it because these guys have been doing so much. This guy has a super high record collection. He's been in so many things. I don't know which one to start with. Hattan I worked with for 3 years, so I know all the dirty secrets, so don't get me started. He knows more dirty secrets than I do. So this is more like a friendly conversation. That's how I like to roll things. And maybe a little background of why I'm qualified to ask these questions, if I am any. I lived in Saudi for 3 years. I lived in Silicon Valley for 3 years. Don't believe anybody who says they lived in Silicon Valley for 3 years because there is nothing called the Silicon Valley. It's just a city, a bunch of cities. It's called Bay Area. I lived in San Francisco and San Mateo. I built a Startup Accelerator program that invested to the most number of Turkish startups born global. I'm very happy. I did angel investments myself. I'm sorry for some of those. And I built companies. I'm sorry for most of those companies I built. I'm around. I'm currently helping UNDP build a social impact accelerator through the partnership model, public, private, and international organization model. So, but what I really enjoy doing these panels is I can ask questions that I'm interested to figure out the answers to. There's not premeditated. And if you guys have any questions, please write them down somewhere. And when we have like 5 minutes-ish, I'll be able to take questions. But please ask questions. Do not make statements. You're not on the panel. Don't try to be a panelist. Just ask a question. That's like 30 seconds short. So I'll start from this side and asking, like, with all the work you've done in many years, especially in an industry that's supposed to be very fast in innovating and bringing new technologies, which then got a little bit, I would say, more different words, but now it's a lot of the organizations are suffering through internationalization, these multiple country or over country applications coming over. What are the challenges in the region from the startup and from the corporate perspective?
Thank you, Ozan. First of all, I think there's a big difference when you talk about the MENA region, Arab world, then MENA region, because there are countries in the MENA region that are not part of the Arab world, and then Far
Turkey,
East,
which is completely.
it's not the same for many reasons. And even in the Arab world, you have two parts. You have the oil-rich countries, and you have the no oil countries. And that's very important to mention because the oil countries, they were blessed with oil, so their whole economy and business model And I think anybody would have that kind of advantage, maybe would do the same. But the non-oil countries, it's a different story. And the challenge in these non-oil countries, the unemployment, it is the biggest challenge facing these countries. And in the past, governments were, the cow. That's the whole business model was based on public sector, government hiring, and slowly these governments now are kind of bankrupt. They have absolutely. You saw in Jordan, schools were off for a whole month in terms of strike for teachers, asking for raise, and government doesn't have money. So it's a serious problem, and that's why entrepreneurship and startups is the way to go. Now, 10 years ago, this whole thing, if you go to the Arab world and you say, angel investor or a startup or an entrepreneur, I mean, this whole thing was like Chinese. It's absolutely not relevant. It's not relevant. The angel, they will think of Mother Teresa. They will not think of somebody with money putting in a startup. So that's the notion.
Incubationists for chickens.
Plus, and I have to be frank, the Arab world that lacks the accountability. We don't have democracy. We don't have functioning parliament. So that is a major problem, because when you have an accountable system in terms of parliamentary system where people elect and democratization is part of the ecosystem, then the whole thing is different. In the Arab world, the government is your father and your mother. They know what's best for you, so they basically guide you towards a direction that they think it's best. Innovation is totally the opposite, because if you are an entrepreneur, by default, you don't accept things that come from above. You have to challenge them. You have to be completely crazy in terms of the way you approach the thing. So that is a real challenge. It's changing. We start seeing governments understanding the importance of involving youth, and understanding the importance of having these opportunities really go to the next stage. In certain countries, Jordan, for example, we have pitching events where the king comes and attends. So that's an indication. The queen. That's an indication that they really understand this is important. But at the same time, you still have the public establishment so rigid. They will fight all disruption. An example, you look at the wars we had in the Arab world for Kareem or Airbnb or Uber, because the bureaucracy, or even if you go to fintech, it's even worse, because the central banks in the Arab world, they think the central bank should have a branch and should be actually a bank. That's not regulatory. In all over the world, the central bank is a regulatory establishment, should not really deal with cash. But in the Arab world, some governors of central banks, they believe that they are doing us a favor by not opening branches and actually giving loans. So having a central bank with that kind of mentality, it's a problem. While if you go to a country like Lebanon, the central bank was so innovative, and they came up with an initiative to encourage startups and VCs. So you have these kind of things going on in the Arab world, and I think we are witnessing an era, thanks to the problems we faced in the Arab world, and now our brothers in the oil-rich countries are also joining clubs, so they are also facing economic challenges, and they are understanding that also oil is not sustainable, so they have to come up with, Saudi Arabia innovation and startups is booming. I mean, 10 years ago, you did not hear any of that. Now, I don't know how many startups and how many accelerators and co-working spaces, and it's booming. And I do hope, and this is our job as those who were strong believers in this concept, to push to have it as a real sustainable move within the society.
So pushing more. That's a good one. So Sander, going from Middle East to Estonia, we heard the challenges, like too much central power is not helping the startups go where they should. But I think in your case, you're kind of the black swan in that category. Like you are really pushing it from a higher agenda, parliamentary level or governance level, and you're taking all these foreigners under your wings, which probably not many European countries are looking forward to do. Why are you doing that? What's wrong with you? Or what's right with you that is wrong with everybody else, more likely to my side?
Great question. So the kind of the thought process behind it is that Estonia, as a really small country, there's only 1.3 million people in the whole country. So it's really tiny. But there's, for a couple of reasons, there's quite a lot of innovation there. So, one of the reasons is because when we were freed by the Soviet rule in 1991, the government really took on the efforts of like leading and digitalizing everything. And already starting with that, I would say that the government has been initiating all of these activities. But moving forward, moving on to more technological stuff, moving on the era of startups in the early 2000s, where in 2003 Skype was created from Estonia. And then moving forward of when the first Estonians exited from Skype when they sold it to Microsoft, and the startup ecosystem was pretty much born. And new startups were started. First VC funds were started. First venture was kind of poured into the ecosystem. And within a few years, it pretty much became clear that, okay, there's not enough of us. So we cannot do all of it because there's like, we need more people to help us.
There's a human multiplication factor that's embedded in the gene.
We need to scale this shit, basically. So that's why now already for 2.5 years, we've had this Startup Visa initiative, the Estonian Startup Visa initiative, where we had, as Melinda was saying before, we've had applications from more than 90 countries already. More than 1,000 people have relocated with their companies or started to work in Estonian startups. So that's kind of one of the initiatives that we have done as the government. But I know that like maybe talking in here as a representative of the government, it may feel kind of weird, but like for us, it really isn't, because we consider ourselves part of the startup ecosystem. We have, we're sitting every day in the co-working spaces with startups. We're listening to their problems. And so we're really connected with, at one hand, with all of the startups, but on the other hand, with all of the startup support organizations as well. So accelerators, incubators, you name it.
So you don't look very governmental with like Startup Estonia branded socks. So I think everybody's okay, super cool with that. But
cool.
The challenge you have in kind of scaling this once it feels it's working, I think is the same challenge we had in KAUST when we started building the Startup Accelerators program with Hattan and Amal and Abdurrahman, and God bless them. And then it became really difficult to expand that ideology from a city that's already super cosmopolitan like Jeddah to expand it into the rest of Saudi, let alone the rest of the Middle East. So in the last 3 years, I think there's been a lot of work with the new accelerator model that you now are serving the whole country, not just a small number of individuals in KAUST. And also, I think there's more that KAUST can play in terms of helping startups maybe relocate, which had to start but was very slow, not like Estonia fast, but like super slow, like Middle East slow. And do you see like that as a challenge to expand into the region, or do you see this as an opportunity to kind of take your time, see what's going on? How do you measure that speed versus execution in the country?
Right. I believe that's a natural evolution of development. We're trying to push ourselves always to the limit. And this is what's really great about the spirit of the team and the culture we have in the Entrepreneurship Center. So we always try to push ourselves to the limit to get to the next level. As Ozan mentioned earlier, we had a major problem of having homogeneous groups. We are a research and technology-based university that has like cutting-edge research taking place. And our job in the center is that to take that research and then create value with it, with the entrepreneurs we deal with, to push it towards the market and solve some real-life global problems. You've seen some of the examples today, and you'll see some more tomorrow as well. And I've been participating in Startup Istanbul and other events around the globe in order to get that outreach moving forward. But that's not enough, because we're dealing with homogeneous groups, and then we need to blend them with other business-related people, or let's say finance-related minded, and so on and so forth. And this is where we went over to expand across the country, and now we're expanding even beyond the borders. And actually, before coming in here, we had the latest investment in terms of, and actually with our colleagues as well in here from Wa'id, who are sitting with us with here, a company from Estonia, who's based in Estonia, to kind of mobilize into Saudi Arabia, where they're building kind of your home fridge vegetable kind of a fridge. Imagine a fridge, but you get your kind of fresh vegetables out of it. It's quite cool startup, and they're really interested. It's called Notifia. And the idea is that we're going beyond the borders to leverage the infrastructure we have and the resources and the access to the capabilities we do have in order to attract the top talent and get the best technology from around the world. So we can have a good control over it, and there is great support from the government. Yes, there is major changes in the government that's happening over the years, like things have changed significantly.
You waited for me to leave to make the change. Thank you so much.
And now it's more like we're moving from the kingdom of oil to the kingdom of startups, where there is a lot of push from all different directions, from all the way from the government to the private sector to the corporate to the NGOs, to other universities. And it will be great to make that movement in order to achieve the targets that you wanted to achieve and acquire the technologies and attract the talent you wanted to move forward to take it forward. So going back to your question, Ozan, yes, we see it as a great opportunity. Even going the challenges we have in MENA region in general, I kind of slightly disagree with you, like there is difference in the challenges, but mainly it's kind of similar to some extent. We got very high youth population and very talent kind of youth base, and they go really well.
As well.
And an unemployment. So that can be a challenge, but can easily turn into an opportunity if we can capture that talent and brain power, and then we build towards that. Other countries, they have aging populations, and that's a bigger of a challenge to solve rather than dealing with.
We need to start exporting startups to Japan.
Yeah.
So bring people to Japan.
To Europe as well.
So yeah, to Europe as well. I mean, Turkey's going through that challenge.
But I think Saudi is an example where I personally, I have to be honest, some of the things that happened in Saudi Arabia, I never imagined.
Exactly.
I never imagined. And I'm going to be going for the first time visa upon arrival. So that's also something that we never thought it will, going through the experience of applying for visas for Saudi Arabia was now thinking, I just want to just try it and see it works.
Yeah, let me know if it works, and I'll come back. That's a tough one. All right, so we got a few minutes. I'll leave a couple of minutes to the founders and other members to ask. But from an investor, I mean, you are kind of investing for your own country as well, in a way. And from an investor's perspective, what are the challenges that you have in finding teams, and what should the teams look for in selecting the country to be invested by? Or selecting region to be invested by?
As an investor, it's a different story, talking about Wa'id or cows, it's a different story. I mean, as an individual investor, all the money I invested is my personal money. The only boss I had is my wife, so which is sometimes good, sometimes bad. But when you look at startups, of course, there's always this social impact factor that you look at, of course. But at the end of the day, it's an investment that I have to make sure that the team or the startup, the team behind the startup, they have the spark, they have the energy, they have the determination, they have the resilience. That's first. Before listening to their idea, I study their personality. And if I really like what I see in terms of personality, and I see these guys really, they will jump from the sky to the floor, then I go to the second stage and listen to their idea, which has to be, of course, viable, scalable, etc., etc., etc. So that's very important. I think the other side of the story is for them. I think they have to understand, or they have to ask themselves the questions what they are looking for. If it's money alone, if it's money plus connections and network, and even sometimes more important than the money, finding the right angel investor or the right sponsor who will open the door for them to verify and to validate the idea. Because sometimes the validation of the idea is more difficult. I'm talking about the Arab world. I mean, this is not the same in Europe. But so coming up with a fintech idea, having a bank or a banker who would really accept to allow you to enter into the financial industry and make it work is more important than getting $2 million as an investment, because you could take the $2 million and but having that person open the door for you and allow you to enter into the financial sector, I think that's
smart investor and smart startup looking for the smart investor. For the Estonia case, I think first thing you need to do is you need to like the cold.
Yeah, that would be the first that would be the first thing. But yeah, as a country, we really look to create a win-win situation. So for example, in the case of the startup visa, when the startup committee goes through applications, they see if it really makes sense for the company to relocate to Estonia or start their, the European business to Europe. Is there something that they add to our startup ecosystem already? And is there something that we can add? So we could create a win-win situation. So that's how we see the startup ecosystem in Estonia evolving, creating these kind of win-win situations.
And for us, we see we're really focusing on the big global problems. KAUS was based on focusing in 4 key research areas, and that's our tackling the entire world, which is food, water, energy, and environment. And those challenges are global challenges. There is great cutting-edge research taking place into it. And we wanted to contribute in pushing the needle in terms of building an entrepreneurial university, but also leveraging science to solve those kind of global problems. And that will help us to push the needles and be part of the global movement, part of the 4th industrial revolution kind of movements in addressing those challenges, because we see the opportunities are endless in terms of capturing those opportunities and create the next waves of movements across the globe.
All right, perfect. Since Bill's on stage, it means I have to go. But please join me in thanking the panel for their great contributions and comments. Thank you.